Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
After quite a long gap, I am back with an episode of Clutter about the coronavirus situation. And we talk about this also when cricket is also topmost on our minds. India is playing in Australia. This is the peak of the cricket season across the world. And the game is taking place in many countries. I've also taken a break from watching the India-Australia T20 match to come in and record this episode. So, in cricket, there is a term or there is a metaphor which I am sure most of you are familiar with because almost everybody watches sport. Some sport in India, but mostly cricket. So, that metaphor is commentator's curse. Are you familiar with that? I'm quite sure. So, what happens is somebody is batting, one of your favorite batsmen is in his 90s, and the commentator says, batting beautifully, chanceless, doesn't look like he can do anything wrong. He looks set for a double century, or India is about to win in a chase, and that is when the batsman gets out. Or that is when, if you are fielding and bowling or defending a total, somebody drops a catch. That is called commentator's curse. How often does it happen? It happens with other sport also. Watching hockey, India leading 1-0. Okay, India leading 1-0, only 30 seconds to go and this trophy will be ours. What happens? In the last 10 seconds, somebody comes in from the other side and scores an equalizer. So that is called a commentator's curse. Now, I am giving you this long bit of defense because I don't want what I am going to talk about today on the Covid-19 situation to suffer from the commentator's curse. So I am quite happy to pray to whichever God whose writ might be running today to make sure that there is no commentator's curse in this case, because after a long time we are looking at evidence of some good news, or good news maybe is not very accurate, better news, or maybe even more accurate, less worse news on the coronavirus front. I don't say good simply because people are still dying, people are still getting infected, and a lot of people are still sick, and some of them may not make it. So that's why not good news, not better news, but news hasn't got worse and news has got less worse. Now we have some data and some marvelous graphics by our young colleague Ramandeep Kaur to illustrate this for you, and I will just run through these very quickly, and in the end I will also speak with you for just a minute in Hindi because I have a special message to deliver to our Hindi viewers and listeners and readers. Now, if you take 9 June as the cutoff date, why do we say 9 June? Because 9 June is around time when the first 2 rounds of lockdowns have ended. Remember, 3rd week of March was the first lockdown. So as these lockdowns have ended, we think that India has done quite badly in spite of the lockdowns. And what is the situation then? What is the situation now? And what happened in the middle? And why do we call today's situation much better news or less worse news? Or why are we afraid that commentator's curse should not hit this situation? So if you go back to 9 June, look at this graphic, then on that day, India had about 10,000 positive cases. At that point, if you go back and look at the headlines, 10,000 cases in a day. Now what's going to happen? And then you see that number goes up. You see that bell curve, the number goes up, up and up. And then you come to a very important point in the history of this pandemic in India so far. That is mid-September. So somewhere around 15 or to 17 September, around that time, you find that this graph peaks. So you get almost 1 lakh, maybe a few hundred short, almost 1 lakh, or let's say 1 lakh cases in a day. So from 10,000 on 9th June, between 15, 18 September, around that time, it goes to 1 lakh a day. And once again, there are headlines, 1 lakh a day, ab kya hoga? Now that is around time that India ups its testing a great deal. And I will come to that graphic as well. Now, when after this peak of mid-September, then you find this bell curve peaking and then beginning to fall on the other side. Now, as we talk, we look at the data of 8th of December. As recent in that. On 8th of December, we have 26,567 cases. That is 26,500 cases. That's a quarter of the cases than you had in mid-September. That's a big change, and it's not as if India is testing much less. In fact, India is still testing upwards of 1 million a day, and at this point many more RT-PCR tests are being done than they were in September, when a much larger percentage was rapid antigen tests. Then we come to our next very important graphic. These are active cases. Now you will find that every day Government of India puts out information in the press conferences. They make claims that so many people have recovered. Now for me, recovery rate, I mean, for those who recover, recovery rate matters. But when you are studying the progress of a pandemic, recovery rate matters less, simply because once you know what your mortality rate is, or approximately what it is, you know that the rest will recover. So if India's mortality rate is now 1.45% and declining, that means in the end more than 98.5% people will recover. That's why we don't look at recovered cases, but we look at active cases. Now active cases are, if 100 people tested positive, first of all you take out unfortunately those who passed away. Then you are left with the rest, those who finish their 10 or 12 days when they are not infectious anymore and all right, they are recovered cases. Those who continue to be sick either at home quarantine, or in hospitals, or in ICUs, or very few on ventilators, those are the active cases. So that is what matters, because that represents the number of people who are sick, and that also represents the pressure on your health system. Now look at active cases. On 9th June, we go back, active cases were just over 1 lakh. It looked very bad, but then again you see how that graphic goes, and follow that graphic. Again when you come to mid-September, that mid-September was a bad time, the worst possible time. When you come to mid-September, again the same sort of bad period of 15, 17, 18 September, that period, you will find India's active cases have gone above 1 million, 10 lakh cases. And you thought mid-September, 10 lakh cases, winter's coming, Diwali season's coming, Eid's coming. After that, there'll be Christmas, New Year's, there are festivals, people are getting tired, states are unlocking. You can't keep the economy locked up forever. So what's going to happen? Maybe this will go out of control in India and the health system will collapse. Once again, something's happened at that point whereby this graph begins to decline. It declines. And where are we now? Today, again, looking at the data of 8th of December, India has 3 lakh, I will give you the precise number, 3,83,866. So let's say 3,84,000 active cases. Just a little over 1/3 of the mid-September peak of active cases for India. And the reason I am doing this episode today, after having been quiet about COVID for quite a few days, was that I was waiting to see a trend getting established. So we've seen a trend over the past couple of weeks of a consistent fall in active cases. That means the number of people who have recovered is more than the number of people who are testing positive consistently over these couple of weeks, and we've discounted Sunday. That's the reason we are talking on Tuesday, because we have figures up to Monday evening, or figures updated as of 8 AM Tuesday morning. So if you look at these numbers, about 3,84,000 active cases. When was the last time we had 3,84,000 active cases? It was on 24th of July. So you've now reset this sort of indicator, this needle back to 24th of July, which is good news. Of course, you want it to be much better. Then daily deaths. Any deaths are bad. Even if 10 deaths take place, which should not have taken place now to a disease, it's a bad thing. So daily deaths, again, if you go back to 9 June, 250. That was also a day when we crossed some kind of a barrier and we said, oh, 250 now. One more thing has been crossed. One more limit has been crossed. We don't know where this will stop. And then it keeps going up. And then you will find around the third week of September. September is a bad month. Around the third week of September, our deaths peak. Our deaths reach almost 1200 a day. 1200 a day is a lot of people dying, even in a large country like India. And once again, we might have thought that if now it's 1200, God knows what it will be like in the next month, 2 months, 3 months. So you will see a subtle thing there, that all the other peaks, active cases, positive cases are in mid-September. But the fatalities peak, the death rate per day, the deaths per day peak is late September. Why? Because generally there is about a 12-day gap between a person testing positive, for those who've unfortunately passed away, between a person testing positive and a death. So there is a 12-day gap, and you can see that very clearly on the graph. So late September you reach about 1200, and after that you again decline, and you keep on declining, and now 8 December you are at 385. Once again, you might want to know, when was the last time we were at 389? So hold your breath and pray. It was on 19th of June. So you set that clock backwards to 19th of June. I do hope, and I know we all hope, that this keeps its march in the same backwards direction, does not turn that direction now. Now, if you look at daily tests, now it was a big complaint earlier that India wasn't testing very much. On 9th of June, thereabouts, India crossed the first sort of threshold of 1.5 lakh tests a day, and this was celebrated. 27th to 30th September, now I have been telling you while describing the last few graphics that something happened in September which helped bend this curve. So this is what happened. Between 27th and 30th September, India really upped its testing numbers. So around 15 to 18 September is when India's cases peak. Around 27th, 28th September is when India's daily deaths peak. 27 to 30 September is also when India's tests peak. So India has by now responded well to this challenge. So India's tests, which was 1.5 lakhs on 9th of June, that we felt relieved about, that we were testing so much, now became 15 lakhs or upwards per day in this 27th September to 30th September period. So somebody who was planning or working on it got this one right, and that made a big difference after that. Even 8th of December, although right now the cases are low, positive cases are low, deaths are low, more than a million, more than 10 lakh tests have been held. In fact, if you look at the entire number till 8th of December, 14 crore 88 lakh tests have been held in India. 14 crore 88 lakh tests. That means, I know there are many duplicate tests, some people get tested twice, but even if you discount for that, it's almost as if 10% of Indians have gone through some kind of a COVID test, either RT-PCR or rapid antigen. That is not bad at all for a country of our size and for a country of our kind of economic means, which are not very generous. So nearly 15 crore tests in a country of 138 crores is very creditable, and this data now flows from all those tests, because if you just had a few tests like some of our neighboring countries, then this data would be very anecdotal. This one is not, and further evidence comes from test positivity rate, that is, of the people who are tested, how many turn out to be positive. This in India's case has peaked on 18th of July, around 18th, 17th, 16th, 17th, 18th July. In fact, if you look at the graphic, looks like 18th of July precisely, and that is when India's TPR or test positivity rate was 16%. That means like 1 in 6 people who were tested positive. That was very bad. In fact, WHO yardsticks tell you that if your TPR or test positivity rate is more than 8%, then you are testing too little, which means you have to test more and more. until your TPR goes below that threshold. So on 18th of July, India's TPR was exactly twice as high as the maximum set up by the WHO. On 8th of December now, this was down to 2.5%. And as I said, this also after more than 1 million tests have been conducted. So these are the big things that you see in India. Now, one good thing that you see in India is how the case fatality rate has come down. When India started in March, April, the base was small, but still it was upwards of 3%, 4% also at one point. Since then, it's been coming down. Now we have a lot of data, so it cannot fall in percentage, full percentage points. It will only fall in fractions. But even if you see the last 3 months, it has fallen from about 1.9% to 1.45% now. Now I know a lot of deaths can go unrecorded, but it cannot be that only a fraction of deaths are recorded. Also remember that once cases are registered as diagnosed COVID positive, then it's almost impossible to hide a death. It's possible that somebody died of a chest infection in a distant place and nobody figured it was COVID. That's possible. But for those who've been identified as COVID positive, in their case, if they are fatalities, it's very difficult to hide it because these are already registered cases. So this percentage is only for people who've tested positive. That has now come to 1.45%. Understand how these things happen, and you might say, how come 3% are dying in America with so much better healthcare? How come 2% are dying in Germany, which was shown as kind of showpiece of the best possible healthcare and which initially had defeated the coronavirus wave much better than any other European country? How come a country like Britain, with less than 5% of India's population, has almost half many fatalities as India? So can India have such low fatalities? So I'm sharing with you to understand this an article that Dr. Devi Sridhar, who is a public health professional, a global star in her profession and in her field, epidemiologist, outspoken, but she speaks sense, Indian origin as you can guess. In fact, for those you might be able to figure out, she's a granddaughter of Mr. G.V. Ramakrishna, a former SEBI chairman and somebody who did India's economic reform a great favor by heading the disinvestment committee, which led the way to public sector companies being listed on Indian stock exchanges. Nevertheless, she has written this wonderful article in Nature, the journal. So I'm sharing it with you, and please read that article, because the point she's making is this is a very funny virus. Funny in the sense that this is a virus which does not follow any broad patterns, and that's why it is almost impossible for the world, for a global organization, even for a country or a country the size of India, the continental size country, to decide one approach to dealing with it. And that's why you find these wide differences between fatality rates, between infection rates, between also the rates of severe COVID, which is why for the scientists this is such a fascinating field of study, and which is why so much good work has happened. We record this episode of Cut the Clutter on a day, it's a very auspicious day, on a day when first patient, not patient, the first subject in the entire world has got injected with the COVID vaccine. That's the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in Britain. It's an Irish woman who's 90 years old. First person to be injected outside the clinical trials. I don't know what's happening in China and Russia. We know that Putin gave an experimental dose to his daughter some time back, but those were still clinical trials. This is the first one. So this is a breakthrough day. In India also, 2 companies have applied for emergency use authorization. You are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. That tunnel may be 100 days away, but these are very crucial 100 days. So dodge the bullet for these 100 days and make sure we do not turn this curve back again, because one thing this virus has told you, this is a completely arrogant virus with no sense of honor, no sense of fair play. It doesn't play to any rules, and there is no third umpire. So please respect this virus, keep your masks, keep your other principles, social distancing, etc., etc. That is the best vaccine for now until the real one comes and is pumped into our arms. This will happen in the course of time. Having said that, I told you that I will speak briefly in Hindi. So my short message in Hindi is, मैं हिंदी में बोलूँगा कि आप में से बहुत लोग हैं जो हिंदी में सुनते हैं, हिंदी में बोलते हैं, हिंदी में लिखते हैं और वो मुझे कहते हैं कि मैं हिंदी में कुछ कट्टर टाइप चीज़ क्यों नहीं करता हूँ। अब मुझे हिंदी से समस्या नहीं है, मेरी हिंदी बहुत अच्छी है, अंग्रेज़ी में समस्या हो सकती है कभी कभी, हिंदी में कभी समस्या नहीं, मैं हिंदी मीडियम टाइप हूँ। लेकिन सिर्फ ये है कि एक इंसान दिन में इतना काम कर सकता है, उसके आगे करने में लगता है कि रिपीट हो जाएगा या थोड़ा ज़्यादा हो जाएगा और आप लोग भी मेरे से थक जाएंगे। इसलिए मैं रोज़ हिंदी नहीं कर पाऊँगा, लेकिन अब मेरा ऐसा फ़ैसला है कि हफ्ते में एक दिन मैं आपके जो सवाल होंगे, जो प्रश्न होंगे, उस सप्ताह में जो बड़ी बड़ी बातें चल रही होंगी उनके बारे में, वो मैं आपको उन सवालों के जवाब दूंगा। मेरे साथ मेरे कोई साथी होंगे जो मेरी थोड़ी मदद करेंगे, आपके सवाल पढ़ के मुझे बताते रहेंगे। कोशिश करेंगे हम ये लाइव करने की, दिन हम फिक्स कर देंगे। हो सकता है मंगलवार को या बृहस्पतिवार को, ट्यूसडे को या थर्सडे को हम करेंगे। अब ये इट्स ए पिटी कि मुझे कोई और भाषा इतनी नहीं आती है। पंजाबी कुछ आती है, लेकिन पंजाबी तो जो पंजाबी वाले हिंदी भी समझते हैं, हिंदी वाले कुछ पंजाबी भी समझते हैं, लेकिन उसके अलावा कोई भाषा नहीं आती, नहीं तो मैं उसमें भी कभी कभी बोलता। लेकिन हिंदी में मैं कोशिश करूँगा कि कम से कम सप्ताह में एक दिन मैं आपसे बोलूँ। मीनवाइल, थैंक यू वेरी मच for watching, and also I want to tell you that after a couple of weeks break, we are resuming our off the cuff series now, and we have some very interesting off the cuff conversations coming up in the next couple of weeks.